Talentless, Jin Sunsung dies at 78, without ever gaining a spiritual root. The Book of 100 Lifetimes refuses to let his story end. It reincarnates him among his descendants up to 100 times. Each lifetime achievement lets him carry one new talent forward. His first requires 100 children and 1,000 grandchildren. Death unlocks the reward, a low-grade spiritual root. He awakens as 14-year-old Deng Yun, a poor spirit farmer. He plans to use 99 remaining lives to turn every inherited weakness into a permanent advantage. The Book of 100 Lifetimes hangs open behind Jin Sunsung's eyes, while his final breath grows weak. Its first page records his first lifetime, his age, his title as Prince of Yan, and the talent he never possessed. His spiritual root is listed as none, yet decades of effort still pushed his martial body into the innate realm. The book also records the techniques he mastered, despite lacking the one qualification required for true immortal cultivation. At the bottom sits the achievement that finally matters: 100 children and 1,000 grandchildren. Nearly 80 years old, Jin lies in his mansion surrounded by kneeling descendants, who fill both room and courtyard. Their crying irritates him at first because he is not dead yet, but the achievement line leaves him unexpectedly satisfied. Whatever his limitations, he knows this first lifetime was not wasted. 60 years earlier, the original heir of Yan drowned, and an ordinary man from Earth awakened inside the dead prince's body. That transmigrator inherited the boy's title, memories, wealth, and immediate understanding of a world ruled by cultivators. In this world, powerful people extend life, fly on swords, move mountains, and treat mortal kingdoms as pieces on a larger board. The Jin clan controls a wealthy mortal region, only because an ancient ancestor reached the false core realm inside a cultivation sect. Because many descendants are born without spiritual roots, the clan eventually separated its immortal branch from its mortal bloodlines. Children with spiritual roots are taken upward to cultivate, while rootless descendants remain below to expand the family and preserve wealth. Jin was tested at 7 years old and had no spiritual root, permanently closing the normal road toward immortal cultivation. He still inherited the princely estate, so his first life became one of enormous comfort with a single impossible regret. Then his transmigration revealed a supreme treasure that completely changed how he viewed failure. The Book of 100 Lifetimes could reincarnate his true spirit among descendants carrying his own bloodline. As long as that bloodline survived, the book could keep sending him forward through a total of 100 lives. Jin immediately understood the first requirement. If he wanted future bodies, he needed a huge family tree to reincarnate into. He therefore embraced the imperial family's demand for descendants with enthusiasm nobody around him could possibly misunderstand. Over the following years, Jin married repeatedly and built one of the largest households in the entire Yan region. Children arrived so quickly that the imperial court rewarded his branch with tonics, resources, and years of tax exemptions. Those rewards gave Jin even more reason to strengthen his body and extend the years available for expanding the bloodline. He also traveled far beyond Yan, leaving descendants among noble houses and martial families across the country. Unlike a man who abandoned those connections, Jin accepted every child who passed the imperial bloodline test. His descendants married outward, formed new branches, and spread his bloodline into an enormous network of families. Over decades, that mortal strategy produced more than 80 descendants who actually possessed spiritual roots. Those talented children were sent toward the cultivation branch, giving the Jin clan even more immortal sprouts than before. The clan rewarded Jin with pills and dragon essence medicine that eventually pushed his mortal martial cultivation into the innate realm. By his late 20s, he already had 100 children. But the 1,000 grandchildren requirement took much longer. Finally, in his 49th year after transmigration, the Book of 100 Lifetimes marked the achievement as complete. Jin continues living until old age, watching his household become a dynasty of descendants tied together by his original decision. When death finally arrives, he closes his eyes without regret and leaves behind a region filled with people connected to his blood. His consciousness awakens inside an empty void where the Book of 100 Lifetimes floats before him. The completed first page shows the prince, his enormous family, and the final moment on the deathbed. Then the book turns to a blank page and announces that the first lifetime has officially ended. Because Jin completed that life's achievement, he earns the right to carry one talent into his next incarnation. Countless streaks of light appear, representing possible talents the book can grant. One faint cyan light settles onto the page and becomes exactly what Jin never possessed before, a low-grade spiritual root. The next lifetime begins at Xianxia Market, a cultivation settlement built around a second-grade spiritual pulse. Wide spiritual fields surround the market, and their crops require cultivators rather than ordinary farmers. A 14-year-old boy named Deng Yun stands among golden spiritual rice while forming the cloud rain technique. Magic power leaves his dantian, gathers overhead as a dark cloud, and falls as rain carrying faint spiritual energy. The crop thrives on that energy, making even simple irrigation work impossible for a mortal without cultivation. Deng must also use techniques such as metal edge finger and ice crystal to kill pests and destroy spiritual weeds. His problem is painfully obvious. Second-level qi refining gives him too little magic power to finish the work in one cycle. Only half a month earlier, Deng awakened the memories of Jin Sunsung and understood that the second lifetime had truly begun. This new body is 14, orphaned, poor, and born with the low-grade spiritual root granted by the book. Instead of entering a glorious immortal clan, Deng has reincarnated as an unknown loose cultivator working rented fields. The disappointment is real, but the difference from his first life is enormous, because this body can actually cultivate. After exhausting his power on the fields, Deng rests inside a small hut, where the local spiritual energy helps him recover. He finishes the remaining irrigation after recovering, then walks back toward the residential district used by spirit farmers. His home is modest but comfortable, with a courtyard, vegetables, fruit trees, and enough space for an independent cultivator. On the road, a dark-skinned neighbor named Ji Pong approaches and excitedly mentions a newly opened secret realm. Ji Pong claims cultivators have already carried valuable foundation establishment resources out of Cloud Dragon Mountain. He wants Deng to join him in exploring the outer edge before stronger people strip the place clean. Deng immediately sees the problem that his excited neighbor is ignoring. Anyone capable of fighting over foundation establishment treasures should be far stronger than two early-stage qi refining farmers. A third-level cultivator, inviting a weaker, second-level stranger into a treasure hunt, also gives Deng another reason to be suspicious. He has already lived an entire lifetime, so promises of easy fortune sound more like bait than opportunity. Pong insists they only need to search an abandoned hall near the edge and leave before serious danger appears. He cites an old cultivator who once missed a similar opportunity and supposedly regretted that cowardice for decades. Instead of becoming tempted, Deng grows more cautious because the story is designed too perfectly to trigger greed. He quietly imagines how easily a stronger companion could murder a weaker one after the treasure was found. Deng therefore pretends to be timid and says he would rather keep farming than risk dying inside an unknown realm. Ji Pong mocks that lack of ambition and warns that farming will never provide enough resources for serious cultivation. He also says he plans to enter the secret realm with Old Man Dong if Deng refuses. Deng notices the older cultivator's name has been mentioned repeatedly, making the entire invitation feel even less trustworthy. He wishes Ji Pong good fortune, lets him leave, and refuses to gamble a second life on someone else's promises. Back home, Deng studies the small courtyard and reminds himself that spirit farming is enough for survival, not advancement. 10 acres of spiritual fields earn only around 20 spirit stones during an ordinary year. That income can buy excellent mortal food and comfort. But cultivation resources consume spirit stones at a completely different scale. One realm-breaking pill or even a low-grade magical artifact can erase most of a farmer's annual profit. Deng sees many neighbors accept that comfortable ceiling because even a minor cultivator can live richly among mortals. He wants something different because 100 lifetimes mean nothing if every incarnation settles for the easiest road available. A reliable cultivation craft could multiply income and create connections that farming alone will never provide. Alchemy, artifact forging, talisman making, and formations all offer paths toward resources and long-term independence. The problem is the entry cost, because every respected craft demands apprenticeship fees before a beginner receives real instruction. Deng has already spent 2 years living frugally and saving nearly everything the original boy earned. Even after that sacrifice, his savings remain below the minimum fee charged by the cheapest instructors. Waiting another 2 years would waste the most valuable period of a young cultivator's development. The original Deng Yun might have accepted that delay, but the soul inside him has already lost one entire lifetime to poor talent. He searches the house for anything valuable enough to sell and quickly confirms there is almost nothing. That leaves borrowing, which is difficult for a 14-year-old farmer, with low cultivation and no famous backing. Deng searches the body's memories for someone trustworthy enough to approach without creating a dangerous debt. A scarred middle-aged cultivator finally surfaces in those memories. His late father's sworn brother, Qin Degang. Qin Degang is a late-stage qi refining cultivator with a management position inside Xiongji market. The two families were once extremely close before Deng's father disappeared while hunting demons. After Deng's mother later died from illness, Qin Degang repeatedly tried to make sure the orphan had someone to rely on. The shy original boy rarely asked him for help, but the older man still visited every harvest season's supply. Looking back with an adult mind, Deng finally recognizes those visits for what they were. Quiet support from someone honoring an old brotherhood. He decides that asking Qin Degang for guidance is better than surrendering 2 more years to poverty. Deng leaves the spirit farmer district and heads toward the better residential quarter near the market's spiritual core. The denser energy there immediately reveals how much status and cultivation determine living conditions inside Xiongji. Passing guarded streets and stronger cultivators, Deng reaches the courtyard belonging to the man who may change his second life's direction. Inside Qin Degang's courtyard, Deng Yun also meets Jin Sunsung, the older man's scholarly son who cultivates year-round at the Xianxia sect. Qin Degang is delighted by the timing and explains that their two families once planned for their children to grow up as sworn kin. That connection matters to Deng because both the Xianxia sect and the Jin clan stood above his first lifetime. Deng greets Jin Sunsung respectfully, only for the older youth to tell him their families are far too close for stiff ceremony. Jin Sunsung remembers that Deng's father once saved his life, so he already treats the orphan as part of his own family. As a first meeting gift, Jin Sunsung produces a green talisman he crafted himself. The talisman creates a defensive shield strong enough to block several attacks from a middle-stage qi refining cultivator. Deng immediately realizes Qin is already a capable medium-grade talisman master. Qin Degang then asks why Deng has finally come to visit after years of refusing help. Deng explains that 2 years of spirit farming have produced only 37 saved spirit stones. The number shocks Qin Degang because he knows exactly how little 10 acres of spiritual land can earn. He quickly understands that Deng has spent almost nothing on himself during those 2 years. Deng admits the reason. He refuses to remain a spirit farmer forever and wants to learn a real cultivation craft. Qin Degang immediately takes out a pouch containing 120 spirit stones. That amount is enough to cover apprenticeship fees, even for better workshops, instead of forcing Deng toward the cheapest teacher available. Deng is stunned because he arrived hoping for advice, not a fortune handed over before he even asked. In his first life, most relatives approached him when they wanted rewards. This older man helps without asking for anything. The unexpected kindness hits Deng harder than any cultivation resource, and he bows deeply in gratitude. He promises to repay every stone with interest once he establishes himself. Qin Degang refuses to hear it, saying family support is not a loan that needs to be counted. Deng explains that the secret realm frenzy finally convinced him he cannot afford to waste more years merely saving tuition. Watching old spirit farmers risk death for one breakthrough opportunity showed him exactly where poverty eventually leads. Qin Degang approves of that conclusion and tells him to spend the money on a craft with a future. Qin Sunsung watches the exchange and quietly forms a strong first impression of Deng. To him, the boy has backbone, restraint, manners, a plan, and the ability to remember genuine kindness. Qin Sunsung therefore urges his father to help choose the apprenticeship instead of leaving Deng to navigate the market alone. That suggestion is unnecessary because Qin Degang has already started investigating reliable masters. He promises to return after the harvest with several options and the real reputations behind them. Deng leaves the courtyard carrying more support than the original body ever allowed itself to accept. Before long, he also learns that Gipeng and Old Man Dong truly entered the secret realm. Their supposed success story spreads quickly, including claims that they recovered treasure worth a low-grade magical artifact. Deng reacts with believable surprise, but becomes even more suspicious privately. A trap often works better after the bait appears proven, especially when greedy cultivators begin repeating the story for free. He returns home and refuses to let curiosity drag him toward people he already distrusts. Several days later, the second spiritual rice harvest of the year finally arrives. Deng's careful farming produces a better yield than many veteran spirit farmers manage. After the market's share is deducted, his portion is exchanged for spirit stones and a small amount of spiritual rice. The field manager praises his diligence and continues treating him fairly because of Qin Degang's reputation. Until now, Deng sold nearly everything because saving for apprenticeship mattered more than eating spiritual rice himself. With Qin Degang's support secured, he can finally stop treating every grain like tuition money. Qin Degang soon invites him back and presents 3 realistic apprenticeship paths. The first is Huang Wulong's family alchemy workshop, run by a strict but honest medium-grade alchemist. Huang's training is slow and demanding, yet anyone who survives the full program leaves with a genuine foundation. The second option is a foundry led by a high-grade artifact refiner with much greater upside. The problem is competition, because talented apprentices surround that master and an ordinary student may never receive serious instruction. The third option is a spirit wine workshop owned by one of Qin Degang's friends. That route is safer, but the owner's son will inherit the secret formulas, leaving outsiders with only the basic production methods. Deng eliminates spirit wine first, because a narrow craft without its core secrets offers too little long-term value. He then compares alchemy and artifact forging, by asking out each master's age, temperament, strength, family, and teaching habits. His conclusion favors Huang Wulong's workshop, even though its ceiling appears lower. Deng still does not know whether he possesses unusual crafting talent, so dependable instruction matters more than gambling on genius. Qin Degang laughs because he expected the cautious boy to choose exactly that path. He reminds Deng that mastering one real livelihood is better than chasing a glamorous trade and learning nothing. Qin Degang agrees to accompany him personally. When the time comes to request apprenticeship, over drinks, Deng finally tells him about Jipong, Old Man Dong, and the repeated invitations to enter the secret realm. The Scarred's manager's expression hardens immediately because the pattern sounds exactly like the schemes he has seen for decades. He praises Deng for refusing and says the boy inherited his father's ability to keep a clear head. Qin Degang then explains common traps used by rogue cultivators, from fake treasure maps to staged partnerships and murder after expeditions. Deng memorizes every example because those lessons may save more than spirit stones later. Qin Degang summarizes everything with one rule: a person who governs his own greed is much harder to trap. Deng knows that rule is brutally difficult for cultivators, whose lifespan keeps shrinking while higher realms remain out of reach. His advantage is different, because the Book of 100 Lifetimes gives him more chances than anyone around him understands. He does not need to wager everything on a single lucky encounter. That realization strengthens the cautious philosophy Deng carried out of his first life. Soon afterward, Qin Degang escorts him to the Huang family alchemy workshop for the formal apprenticeship ceremony. Another new disciple stands beside Deng, a 16-year-old girl named Li Huayao. Prayer mats are arranged before Huang Wulong, while relatives from both sides witness the ceremony. Huang Wulong is a 7th-level qi refining cultivator, with a lean face, sharp eyes, and the presence of an experienced alchemist. He warns both newcomers that entering his workshop means obeying the rules of the alchemy Dao, rather than chasing shortcuts. Deng and Li Huayao kneel, kowtow, and offer apprenticeship tea. After accepting the tea, Huang Wulong officially receives them as disciples. Because Li Huayao is older, she becomes Deng's senior sister, even though they entered on the same day. The workshop's existing disciples then come forward, one by one, to welcome the 2 newcomers. Deng greets each senior respectfully, already noticing how much warmer this atmosphere feels than a competitive sect. Then, Huang Wulong's young daughter appears in white robes with jewelry chiming at her wrists. Her name is Huang Wanyu, and she immediately objects when her father introduces her as the little junior sister. Wanyu points out that she served apprenticeship tea before either newcomer arrived. By workshop rules, that technicality makes the younger girl their senior, despite her age. Huang Wulong realizes his clever daughter arranged the situation deliberately, but accepts the argument. Deng therefore addresses the child as little senior sister without complaint. Li Huayao is far less pleased about calling a girl several years younger her senior. The older disciples laugh because Huang Wanyu has spent years at the bottom and finally found someone she can outrank. 3 days later, Huang Wulong explains the workshop's training ladder to the new disciples. Apprentices first spend years learning medicinal ingredients, identification, processing, and storage. Only after mastering medicine are they allowed into the fire control room. Fire control comes next, followed by pill condensation and eventually independent refinement. Each stage normally takes years, making the full apprenticeship closer to a long cultivation than a short vocational course. Two disciples are welcomed because their arrival allows older apprentices to advance into the next stage. That structure removes much of the petty competition Deng expected from a cultivation workshop. Zhang Wu and Nan are assigned to supervise Deng and Li Huayao in the medicine room. Deng spends his days processing herbs, and his nights copying manuals beneath an oil lamp. He approaches the work exactly like cultivation, repeating fundamentals until identification and preparation become instinctive. Within a short time, dozens of common materials and their properties are fixed firmly in his memory. Zhang Wu quickly notices how steadily the quiet junior improves. His progress also means Zhang Wu and Nan may finally advance into fire control once the newcomers can handle routine medicine work. Li Huayao, however, proves much less patient with repetitive preparation. She works quickly when someone watches, then slows down or loses focus whenever supervision disappears. That contrast makes Deng's discipline stand out without him needing to compete openly. For the first time in his second life, he has entered a place where patience itself can become a genuine cultivation advantage. Deng quietly commits to mastering every stage properly, even if the workshop expects the journey to consume decades. Zhang Wu jokes that Deng's steady progress means he and Nan may finally advance into fire control next month. He adds that medicinal preparation is not difficult when someone is willing to repeat the basics without cutting corners. His frustration is directed mostly at Li Huayao, whose patience disappears whenever the work becomes repetitive. Nana repeatedly corrects her herb trimming, root lengths, and processing mistakes while Deng quietly finishes his own assignments. Li Huayao is not malicious or foolish. She is simply a pampered branch family daughter who has never learned to push herself. Another month of constant supervision finally forces her to meet Huang Wulong's minimum standard. The master inspects both newcomers' work and allows Zhang Wu and Nan to advance into the fire control room. The two seniors are thrilled because years of medicine preparation have finally unlocked the next stage of alchemy. Deng and Li Huayao now inherit most of the medicine room's daily workload. Huang Wulong still handles rare materials personally, but ordinary processing becomes the responsibility of the junior disciples. Li Huayao looks horrified when she realizes fewer seniors means more work instead of more freedom. Huang Wulong solves that problem by assigning his daughter Huang Wanyu to supervise the medicine room. Wanyu accepts the authority enthusiastically and immediately begins searching Li Huayao's work for mistakes. So, her first inspection finds improperly cleaned red Ganoderma, earning Li Huayao another correction before the day has properly started. Deng watches Wanyu's fierce little expression and realizes the girl has been waiting years for a chance to command someone. By noon, the room is heavy with medicinal fragrances and the heat of drying herbs. Li Huayao drops her pestle for the third time, drawing another stern warning from her much younger senior sister. Wanyu works hard to imitate a strict adult, even though her childish face makes the performance more amusing than frightening. Her treatment of Deng is noticeably gentler because his ingredients are consistently processed correctly. That difference only makes Li Huayao more convinced that the little senior sister is playing favorites. Deng pretends not to notice the resentment and keeps sorting herbs at the same calm pace. Wanyu occasionally teaches him small tricks for handling rare roots, fibers, and medicinal leaves. She inspects one batch closely, approves the cut and texture, then rewards Deng with an almost ceremonial pat on the shoulder. Li Huayao nearly destroys another herb while watching the difference in treatment. Once Wanyu gets bored with supervision, she sits nearby studying a manual for the board game Go. Li Huayao immediately sneaks candied fruit and slows down until Wanyu warns her without even looking up. The older girl's attempt to recruit Deng into helping also fails before she can finish suggesting it. Wanyu threatens her with a knight, copying the classic of 100 herbs if she keeps wasting time. Li Huayao reluctantly returns to work, while Deng hides his amusement behind another tray of medicine. Deng's first lifetime left him with many refined hobbies beyond cultivation, including literature, calligraphy, music, and strategy games. That old experience makes the Go manual in Wanyu's hands more familiar to him than anyone realizes. By evening, Deng finishes the last medicine batch and approaches Wanyu for inspection. She checks the herbs one by one, finds nothing worth criticizing, and reluctantly pronounces his work acceptable. 5 years pass, with the pharmacy changing, far less than the people working inside it. Deng is now 20, taller and calmer, with years of medicine work and cultivation settled into his movements. Huang Wanyu has grown into a bright young woman, whose quick eyes still carry the same playful intelligence. The two sit across an ebony go board, while Li Huayao processes medicine nearby. Li Huayao has also matured, but her attention still drifts toward whatever looks more interesting than the task in front of her. She watches Deng and Wanyu lean over the board, and immediately decides the pair looks suspiciously well matched. Wanyu catches the matchmaker's smile from across the room, and accuses Li Huayao of slacking again. Li Huayao returns to her knife so quickly that she slices the next piece of poria crooked. Deng changes the subject by asking when the workshop's incoming apprentices will arrive. Wanyu argues that he has stayed in medicine far too long and should have entered fire control years earlier. Deng reminds her that Huang Wulong's rules require a full 6 years of medicinal study before advancing. Wang Yu points out that her father wrote those rules himself and could easily make an exception. Deng refuses the shortcut because medicinal knowledge is the foundation beneath every reliable pill formula. He would rather spend the full 6 years now than discover a fatal gap after becoming responsible for expensive ingredients. Wan Yu sighs that cultivation and alchemy both demand far too much patience. Deng lightly taps her forehead and reminds her that someone who constantly takes breaks has not earned the right to complain. Both possess low-grade spiritual roots and currently sit around the middle of the 3rd level of qi refining. Wan Yu is younger, but her family has supplied pills, spiritual rice, and a much better cultivation environment since childhood. Deng has used almost no luxury resources and still remains close behind her. That comparison makes the real difference obvious. Wan Yu has never cared enough about higher realms to chase them aggressively. She openly admits that she does not expect to reach foundation establishment and sees little reason to sacrifice every pleasure trying. Deng cannot call that irrational because low-grade roots make the climb brutally slow even under good conditions. Early qi refining can consume years per level, while later stages take longer and longer as the cultivator ages. Past 60. Declining vitality makes foundation establishment increasingly unrealistic for ordinary cultivators. That is why wealth ranks first among the classic necessities of cultivation. A mediocre cultivator without pills, safe land, teachers, and time may never reach the realm where talent can even be tested. Wan Yu notices Deng becoming thoughtful and waves a hand before his face until he returns to the board. By this point, their relationship has quietly changed from childhood familiarity into an understood courtship. Huang Wulong has never formally announced anything, but his approval is obvious enough that neither young cultivator needs to hide. One evening, Deng meets Wan Yu near a bamboo grove beside the river after the workshop closes. She brings him a small bottle containing a genuine purple cloud pill. The pill is designed to help low-grade spiritual root cultivators break through the bottleneck leading into the middle stage. Recognizes it immediately and refuses because the medicine is far more expensive than anything he has accepted from her before. For 5 years, he has rejected even ordinary cultivation pills whenever Wan Yu tried to slip them into his hands. He explains that continued spirit farming has allowed him to save enough money to prepare for his own breakthrough. Deng once tried repaying Qin Degang's original loan, only to anger the older man badly enough that he abandoned the idea. Instead, those savings have been accumulating for exactly this kind of bottleneck. Wan Yu refuses to accept the excuse and reveals a second purple cloud pill from her own belongings. Her family provided one for her, while the pill in Deng's hand was purchased entirely with her private savings. Since the medicine cannot be used repeatedly for the same bottleneck, she has no practical reason to keep the extra one. She threatens to throw it into the river if Deng refuses again. That ends the argument because he knows she is stubborn enough to make the threat believable. Deng pulls Wan Yu gently into his arms and thanks her without trying to turn the moment into another debt. Unknown to either of them, Huang Wulong watches briefly from deeper inside the bamboo grove. The alchemist sees enough to understand his daughter's choice and leaves with a quiet smile instead of interrupting. That night, Deng returns to his modest courtyard and begins his normal cultivation routine. He circulates qi for hours until his meridians reach their daily limit, and further absorption would only create strain. Looking inward, Deng sees that the energy vortex inside his dantian has become slightly denser than the day before. At his current pace, roughly 40 more days should place him at the peak of the 3rd level. The progress is slow, but Deng has learned to appreciate cultivation that moves forward reliably instead of gambling on miracles. Every strand of qi accumulated today remains part of tomorrow's foundation. His cheap storage pouch contains only a small internal space, yet it holds nearly everything valuable he owns. Inside rests Wan Yu's purple cloud pill, beside his carefully saved spirit stones. The sight Deng, how much his second life has changed. Since arriving as an orphaned spirit farmer, he now possesses a craft, dependable relationships, cultivation resources, and a route toward the next realm. More importantly, none of those gains came from risking his life inside the suspicious secret realm. Years earlier, Qin Degang quietly dealt with Gipong and Old Man Dong. After confirming their criminal scheme, the two were eventually caught by market security while committing another crime and executed as rogue cultivators. Deng never needed to expose himself or take revenge. Personally, patience allowed the danger to remove itself. That outcome strengthens his belief that caution is not cowardice when time is on his side. The Book of 100 Lifetimes still sits behind his consciousness, changing the meaning of every short-term temptation. Other cultivators may feel forced to seize one dangerous opportunity before age closes the door. Deng can build slowly, preserve relationships, and wait until his strength makes an opportunity safe enough to deserve the risk. With that advantage in mind, he resumes cultivation and lets another ordinary night push the second lifetime forward. His next immediate goal is simple: finish the third level cleanly, use the purple cloud pill only when necessary, and avoid wasting Wan Yu's gift. The lesson from his first life remains constant talent matters, but a long path is built just as much from judgment and discipline. For Deng, the second lifetime is finally becoming more than a re-roll of talent. It is becoming a life he actually wants to preserve. Deng increasingly values the slow certainty of cultivation, even when his cheap storage pouch reminds him how little wealth he still possesses. Inside that pouch sit Wan Yu's purple cloud pill and the spirit stones he has managed to save through years of careful work. His cautious approach also paid off with Ji Pong and Old Man Dong, whose criminal scheme eventually collapsed without touching him. Market security caught the pair committing another offense, and both were executed as rogue cultivators. Deng never needed to fight them personally, proving again that patience can be more effective than reckless confrontation. Not long afterward, Deng visits Qin Degang and finds the older man unusually cheerful. The reason is Jin Sunsung, who has finally returned home from the distant xianxia sect. Years of reading Huang Wulong's books have taught Deng enough geography to understand what that journey really means. The surrounding cultivation world is vast, with three great golden core sects towering over smaller forces and markets. Xianxia market itself exists under several foundation establishment powers, while the nearest great sect still lies tens of thousands of miles away. Jin Sunsung possesses a high-grade spiritual root, rare talent by local standards but merely respectable inside a great sect. That contrast gives Deng a much clearer picture of how small Xianxia market truly is. Qin Degang jokes that his son is already over 30 and had better return with plans to continue the family line. Then the older man turns the same pressure toward Deng, pointing out that 20 is no longer childhood. He promises to help arrange a proper wedding. Whenever Deng finally stops pretending the subject does not exist, Deng smiles through the teasing, but the idea is already less hypothetical than Qin Degang realizes. After leaving, Deng spends almost all his saved spirit stones at a reputable artifact pavilion. He buys an exquisite phoenix hairpin forged from cold iron and set with a high-grade cold crystal. The hairpin is also a medium-grade magical artifact that calms the mind and helps cleanse minor impurities. Several days later, Huang Wenyu arrives at the medicine room, wearing the phoenix ornament in her hair. Her unusually good mood immediately catches Li Huayao's attention. Li Huayao examines the new hairpin, looks toward Deng, and begins teasing Wan Yu about the mysterious young man who bought it. Deng pretends to hear nothing and continues sorting medicinal ingredients. Wan Yu's ears turn red despite her stern expression, and she threatens Li Huayao with another round of copying if the gossip continues. The reaction only confirms what everyone in the room already suspects. That same day, Huang Wulong enters the ancestral hall and burns incense before a portrait of his late wife. He quietly tells the woman in the portrait that their daughter has grown up and chosen someone steady. The father's approval has been obvious for years, but this is the moment he accepts the relationship completely. Later, after another game of Go, Huang Wulong summons Deng and Wan Yu into the inner hall. His long stare makes Deng uneasy until Wan Yu openly complains that her father is frightening her future husband. Huang Wulong sighs that a grown daughter truly stops belonging to her father. Then his expression turns serious, and he places the Huang family's secret pharmacology inheritance into Deng's hands. The gift contains knowledge normally reserved for blood relatives, rather than ordinary disciples. Huang Wulong explains that he is entrusting Deng with both his most precious daughter and the family's deepest professional legacy. Deng immediately kneels and kowtows 3 times. His own parents died young, while Huang Wulong taught him alchemy, fed his future, and treated him as more than a hired apprentice. Deng therefore promises to regard Huang Wulong as a father and care for him throughout his old age. Wan Yu breaks into tears and embraces her father, ending the solemn moment with the warmth of a real family. Qin Degang arrives the following morning, carrying gifts so both sides can settle the marriage formally. The elders choose an auspicious date several months away. Wan Yu counts the remaining days and complains privately that the wait is far too long. Deng teases that he is the impatient one because he wants to bring her home immediately. Her attempted annoyance collapses into laughter, making the engagement feel settled long before the ceremony. While waiting for the wedding, Deng reaches the peak of the 3rd level of qi refining. Then, progress stops completely at the bottleneck, leading into the middle stage. For the first time, repeated cultivation produces no visible gain, no matter how patiently he circulates qi. Deng finally understands why cultivators describe bottlenecks as walls rather than simple shortages of energy. Even several weeks of stagnation irritate him, making years of failed attempts almost unimaginable. He decides there is no reason to prove stubbornness when Wan Yu already gave him the correct resource. After preparing his body carefully, Deng sows the purple cloud pill. The medicine dissolves immediately and releases a powerful stream of spiritual energy through his limbs and meridians. His qi refining technique begins circulating almost by instinct as the pill attacks the invisible barrier. Deng spends the entire night guiding the surge rather than forcing it recklessly. By dawn, the bottleneck finally shatters. His mana becomes noticeably denser, and the 4th level cultivation method begins circulating without obstruction. Deng has officially entered the middle stage of qi refining. The breakthrough also proves that Wan Yu's expensive gift was not symbolic. It saved him from potentially years of stagnation. Before long, the chosen wedding day arrives. The ceremony is not extravagantly large, but relatives, market officials, friends, and workshop connections fill the Huang courtyard. Jin Sunsung returns early enough to help receive guests beside Deng. His status as a disciple of a great sect immediately raises the respect shown toward both families. Deng is moved because Jin Sunsung treats the wedding as a family responsibility rather than a social obligation. By evening, the guests finally depart, and the noise fades from the courtyard. Deng enters the bridal room, where Wan Yu waits, beneath a traditional red veil. When he lifts it, the playful senior sister he has known for years suddenly looks shy enough to seem like a different person. She addresses him as husband for the first time. Deng answers with equal tenderness, and the two complete the wedding rituals together. The night closes their long courtship, without changing the mutual trust that built it. After marriage, Deng moves fully into the alchemy workshop, instead of maintaining his old courtyard as his main home. The newlyweds are affectionate, but Deng refuses to abandon cultivation or professional discipline. Wan Yu continues training at her own relaxed pace, and Deng no longer tries to turn her into someone obsessed with longevity. The pharmacy soon receives another pair of young apprentices. Deng and Li Huayao guide them through the first medicinal lessons, exactly as older disciples once guided them. When the newcomers can finally handle routine preparation, Huang Wulong makes the long-awaited announcement. Deng and Li Huayao are promoted from the medicine room into fire control. Li Huayao nearly celebrates aloud because fire control feels like real alchemy. After years of washing, cutting, drying, and cataloging herbs, Deng is pleased for a different reason. 6 full years of foundational study have now been completed without special treatment. Although Huang Wulong privately gave him deeper pharmacology teachings after the engagement, Deng still followed the public apprenticeship ladder. Exactly. That matters to him because inherited secrets mean more when they rest on a foundation earned through ordinary work. Before leaving the medicine room, Huang Wulong reviews storage rules and handling methods one final time. Deng looks across the shelves and realizes how much invisible knowledge has accumulated there over 6 years. Every root, leaf, mineral, fungus, and spiritual liquid carries preparation requirements that can decide whether a furnace succeeds or explodes. Alchemy no longer looks like throwing rare ingredients into fire and hoping for a miracle. It looks like thousands of small decisions made correctly in sequence. Li Huayao understands the theory too, even if her patience never matched Deng's. Together, they enter the fire control stage with completely different personalities, but the same formal foundation. For Deng, the promotion also marks another quiet victory over his original second life circumstances. The orphan spirit farmer, who once counted every spirit stone, now belongs to an alchemy family and carries its secret inheritance. His cultivation has reached the 4th level. His marriage is settled, and his professional path finally extends beyond farm work. None of those changes came from the dangerous shortcut offered by the secret realm. Instead, they came from relationships, judgment, and years of repetition that most impatient cultivators would consider unbearably slow. The Book of 100 Lifetimes makes that patience easier because Deng knows this life does not need to accomplish everything at once. Still, he has no intention of wasting the life, merely because more reincarnations remain. Fire control is the first stage where he can begin converting 6 years of medicinal knowledge into actual pill-making ability. That prospect excites him far more than the prestige of simply calling himself an alchemist. When Deng steps through the fire control room's door, he treats it like the beginning of another cultivation realm. He has mastered ingredients. Now he must learn to make flame obey with the same precision. Only after that will pill condensation become possible. The road remains long, but for the first time, every stage ahead belongs to a craft Deng chose for himself. He enters the next phase with a family behind him, a wife beside him, and enough patience to spend years mastering a single flame. Before leaving the medicine room permanently, Deng reviews the final storage rules and thanks the seniors who trained him through the foundational stage. Li Huayao acts like a veteran while lecturing the new apprentices, despite spending years trying to escape the same boring work. Huang Wanyu laughs at the performance, because everyone remembers exactly how often Li Huayao used to avoid assignments. Meanwhile, Huang Wuxi begins testing Deng on the secret records of pharmacy that he entrusted to him after the engagement. The work contains 30 chapters, with the first 10 covering foundational pharmacology and medicine preparation. Those basics support fire control, pill condensation, and the ordinary formulas used by beginning alchemists. The later chapters contain the Huang family's true inheritance, including advanced theory and the reasoning behind difficult formulas. At the end lies the complete deduction history of the family's rejuvenation pill. The workshop currently depends on 3 signature medicines, including the rejuvenation pill, yellow sprout pill, and spirit feeding pill. The rejuvenation pill remains popular because Huang Wulong balanced effectiveness and cost better than nearby competitors. Deng studies earlier failed versions and sees that stronger effects often required ingredients too expensive for ordinary loose cultivators. Cheaper versions lowered efficacy enough to lose the workshop's market advantage. Huang Wulong spent years changing herbs and ratios until he found the version that best balanced price, stability, and medicinal strength. That history teaches Deng more than simply memorizing the final recipe ever could. When Huang Wulong asks what he learned, Deng gives the answer he has slowly reached on his own. He says pill formulas are not the true foundation of alchemy. The deeper core is understanding why medicinal properties combine the way they do. A formula can change endlessly, but the underlying principles of compatibility, transformation, balance, and conflict remain consistent. Only an alchemist who understands those principles can improve an old formula or create a new one. Huang Wulong is visibly pleased because Deng has finally crossed from memorizing knowledge into understanding how alchemists think. He therefore orders Deng to study practical pharmacology with him every afternoon, in addition to fire control training. Memorizing the secret records is not enough, because the knowledge must be tested against real ingredients, failures, and changing conditions. Marriage also changes Deng's cultivation resources dramatically. Huang Wuxim tells his new son-in-law that the family will now provide the yearly necessities required for his cultivation. He hands Deng spiritual rice, qi-gathering pills, and enough spirit stones to cover ordinary expenses. The package is worth more than Deng could have saved through a decade of spirit farming. For a moment, the contrast with his old courtyard is almost difficult to process. Huang Wulong makes one condition clear. Resources are being provided so Deng can cultivate properly, not so he can become lazy. Fire control begins the next morning, under the master's personal instruction. Huang Wulong refuses to delegate this stage, because unstable flame can destroy ingredients, furnaces, and years of accumulated effort. He teaches the mysterious Yang fire control art, a method divided into 5 increasingly difficult realms. The stages begin with fire induction, then flame division, layered flame control, revolving fire wheel, and final fire restraint. Huang Wulong demonstrates the entire sequence at the furnace, so the newcomers can see how one flame becomes dozens of controlled forms. He first raises a small flame from his fingertips. That flame divides, stacks, circles the furnace, and finally compresses into a tiny golden point containing terrifying heat. For basic pill refinement, the first 3 stages are enough. Huang Wulong expects more from Deng and tells him to master all 5 before receiving the family's deeper fire techniques. Deng begins with the simplest challenge, producing one stable wisp of flame at his fingertip. His first attempt succeeds for only a moment, before Li Huayao's excited cheering breaks his concentration. The flame vanishes instantly, leaving only smoke. Huang Wulang explains that induction is easy while stability is the true threshold. Spiritual power must flow into the fingertip at a perfectly even rate without surging or weakening. A useful training flame should remain the same size even when the cultivator is distracted or physically tired. Li Huayao tries next and fails even faster because impatience makes her push too much power at once. After several failures, she concludes that controlling one tiny flame is somehow worse than grinding herbs. Huang Wulong compares spiritual power to thread coming from a spool. Releasing too quickly snaps the thread, while pulling too tightly starves the flame. He orders them to practice every morning until they can hold a flame for an entire incense stick. Then the master leaves the beginners alone with a task, simple enough to understand and difficult enough to occupy months. Li Huayao practices seriously for less than an hour, before claiming exhaustion and sitting down to recover. Deng continues until his dantian is genuinely drained. His morning becomes a repetitive cycle of induction, collapse, meditation, recovery, and another attempt. That pattern suits him, because repetition has never frightened him. At noon, Huang Wanyu arrives carrying food and immediately coughs when smoke from failed fire induction fills the room. She brings a nourishing soup, prepared with ginseng and red dates. Deng praises it extravagantly, drawing on the standards of someone who once ate from a prince's table. Wanyu is delighted enough to promise another bowl the next day. Li Huayao shamelessly looks hopeful, until Wanyu gives her a portion while complaining about constant freeloading. Outside formal training, Deng also keeps improving his cultivation with Wanyu. He discovers a dual cultivation method that lets the couple circulate qi together while spending private time as husband and wife. The method is not miraculous, but it makes Wanyu far more willing to cultivate consistently. Her progress improves enough that she approaches the peak of the 3rd level. Deng benefits as well, because better resources and coordinated cultivation increase his accumulation speed significantly. While Ting's household becomes more stable, Qin Degang remains worried about Qin Song. The older youth has left the market again to travel and search for opportunities connected to foundation establishment. Qin Degang wanted his son to settle down first, but a talented cultivator with a great sect behind him sees the world differently. Deng reassures the worried father that Qin Song's high-grade root and sect training give him far better odds than ordinary loose cultivators. He cannot promise success, but he understands why Qin Song refuses to abandon the chance while his vitality remains strong. Back at the Huang workshop, another change arrives when Wanyu becomes pregnant. Huang Wulong is ecstatic and immediately begins treating his daughter like the most fragile medicinal treasure in the market. He orders Deng to reduce her workload and spend more time at home. Deng follows the request. Without sacrificing the cultivation routine Wanyu can safely maintain. Years continue passing inside the fire control room. 5 years after beginning the stage, Deng can hold a flame at his fingertip as calmly as breathing. Drafts no longer disturb it, and changes in his attention no longer make the flame collapse. He can divide the fire into many strands and make those strands move independently. He can stack flames into pillars, bend them into rings, and rotate them around the furnace with precise control. At the highest stage, Deng compresses dispersed fire into a tiny point, containing far more heat than its size suggests. Huang Wulong watches the demonstration and declares the mysterious Yang fire control art mastered to perfection. The achievement is not the result of exceptional comprehension. Huang Wulong has repeatedly told Deng that his natural understanding is merely respectable rather than heaven-defying. What impresses the older alchemist is the willingness to repeat the same motion for years without growing careless. Deng treats that praise seriously, because discipline is one advantage he can actually control. His pharmacology has advanced at the same time, allowing him to discuss formula adjustments instead of merely following written recipes. Huang Wulong increasingly asks for Deng's opinion when evaluating medicinal combinations. That creates an embarrassing contrast Li Huayao, who has only reached the first 3 stages of the fire control art. Her master repeatedly scolds her for allowing talent and resources to replace effort. Li Huayao tries to hide whenever Deng's progress becomes the example used in those lectures. Despite the teasing, Deng never treats her as a rival because the workshop's structure rewards cooperation rather than internal competition. His real comparison is always with the person he was the previous year. By now, the poor spirit farmer who once struggled to irrigate 10 acres can control thousands of changes in flame. His income, family position, and cultivation have all risen together because the craft provides stability instead of one-time fortune. The long apprenticeship has also shown Deng how different cultivator wealth is from princely wealth. Gold could buy almost anything in his first life, but spirit stones disappear quickly when pills, techniques, artifacts, and cultivation environments enter the calculation. That makes a reliable alchemy inheritance more valuable than a treasure chest that can be spent once. Deng begins to understand why families guard formulas so fiercely and why Huang Wulong's trust matters beyond affection. One day, Deng will be responsible for protecting that inheritance and deciding who receives it after him. The thought becomes more important now that his own household is growing. Wanchu's pregnancy means Deng is no longer building only for himself or his future reincarnations. He is building a family inside this lifetime, with people whose futures depend on decisions he makes now. Fire control is finally complete. The next challenge is learning how to turn controlled flame, medicinal theory, and spiritual power into real pills. Li Huayao's slow progress eventually forces Huang Wulong to supervise her personally until she can at least complete the first 3 fire control stages. Whenever he compares her with Deng, she looks ready to hide inside the furnace rather than hear another lecture about diligence. Deng's own control is efficient enough that most of his mana remains untouched after complex demonstrations. That efficiency matters because wasted spiritual power becomes a serious limitation during longer refeastments. Once fire control reaches a stable level, Deng temporarily steps away from the furnace to concentrate on cultivation. The 4th, 5th, and 6th qi refining levels belong to the middle stage and do not contain the same major bottleneck he just crossed. He enters seclusion, consumes simple fasting medicine, and spends days steadily accumulating mana. The resources provided by the Huang family allow him to cultivate much faster than spirit farming ever did. When Deng leaves seclusion, his aura has risen into the 5th level of qi refining. The breakthrough arrives several years earlier than his old resource-poor pace would have allowed. Under the peach tree outside, a small girl practices sword forms with a wooden blade and a seriousness far beyond her age. She is Deng and Wanyu's daughter, Deng Huijin, now 4 years old. Her recently tested spiritual root is medium-grade fire affinity, better than either parent's natural aptitude. Deng immediately understands how dramatically that talent can change her cultivation future. Before her meridians mature, he gives her physical foundation exercises, medicinal baths, and safe sword forms, rather than true qi cultivation. Huijin masters those mundane sword movements so quickly that Deng must keep finding new sets, simply to challenge her. He begins imagining the possibility that his daughter may one day become a genuine sword cultivator. 2 more years pass before Huijin's meridians mature enough for proper cultivation. Deng and Wanyu obtain a suitable fire-attributed qi refining method for her. On the first day, both parents sit beside the child and guard her circulation carefully. Huijin remains focused for hours, refining spiritual energy until her young meridians finally become sore. Her perseverance impresses Deng almost as much as the speed created by her medium-grade root. Without pills or spiritual rice, the child already absorbs energy at a rate comparable to what Deng once achieved with support. The comparison teaches him again that cultivation talent is not an abstract ranking. A better spiritual root improves speed, purity, bottlenecks, and the amount of expensive help required at every stage. That same afternoon, Deng and Li Huayao begin learning pill formation for the first time. The process sounds simple on paper. Gather medicinal liquid, condense it, solidify the pill, lock the essence, and retrieve it. In practice, one weak moment can reduce an entire furnace of ingredients to ash. Huang Wulong deliberately starts them with cheap fasting pills because failure is guaranteed, and the ingredients are inexpensive. Li Huayao volunteers to go first and handles melting reasonably well with her existing fire control skill. During condensation, however, one badly timed fluctuation lets flames sweep through the mixture and destroy everything. Huang Lung points out that both her medicinal judgment and fire stability failed at the exact same moment. Deng attempts the same formula next. His fire wheel melts each ingredient separately before guiding the liquids into a controlled spiral. He forms a pale yellow pill successfully enough to make it leave the furnace intact. Then the color turns black, and the pill crumbles in his hand. Huang Wulong explains that Deng opened the furnace before properly locking the medicinal essence inside. Most of the process was correct, but a mistake during the final moments still made the result worthless. The master demonstrates the retrieval sequence again and emphasizes that alchemy does not forgive 99 correct steps, followed by one careless one. On Deng's second attempt, a usable fasting pill finally emerges. Huang Wulong congratulates the progress, but warns him that a beginner pill proves almost nothing about difficult refinement. Even ordinary pills have quality levels determined by purity, efficacy, impurities, and spiritual patterns. High-quality medicine may contain visible spiritual veins, while top-grade pills carry almost no toxins at all. That standard gives Deng a much higher target than merely producing something that does not collapse. Elsewhere, Qin Degang receives devastating news in a far more personal form. Qin Sunsung returns home covered in blood, carrying a swaddled infant against his chest. He tells his father that the child is his son, Qin Wan. While traveling, Qin Sunsung obtained a rare Foundation establishment resource connected to dangerous baleful qi. News of the treasure leaked, and other cultivators ambushed him for it. Qin Wan's mother died fighting two attackers, so her husband could escape with their infant. Qin Sunsung knows keeping the resource any longer will only attract more enemies. He therefore decides to attempt Foundation establishment immediately, rather than wait for perfect conditions. If he succeeds, he will return in a few months as a cultivator who can protect the family. If he fails, Qin Degang must raise the child and forgive a son who chose the Tao over safety. Qin Degang has lived too long in the cultivation world to pretend there is a harmless alternative. A Foundation establishment resource can become deadlier to own than to use. He accepts Qin Wan, tells Qin Sunsung the family burden will be held, and lets his son leave for the breakthrough attempt. Deng learns the full story only later, and it makes the distance between ordinary life and cultivation feel painfully clear. Not every promising cultivator gets to grow old, simply because talent and opportunity finally meet. Back at Deng's old courtyard, a farewell gathering brings several workshop disciples together around a bonfire and roasted meat. Deng, Wan Yu, Li Huayao, Zhang Wu, and Nan have now spent more than a decade connected through the same apprenticeship. Zhang Wu and Nan recently completed their training and married each other under Huang Wulong's guidance. They have decided not to remain in the established xianxia market. A newer settlement called Unyong Market is expanding hundreds of miles away and desperately needs alchemists, craftsmen, and cultivator families. Zhang Wu argues that two low-grade alchemists can survive in xianxia but will always compete beneath established workshops. In a frontier market, the same skills might purchase land, customers, and a family business before prices rise. He has researched the factions, spirit veins, ownership structure, and risks, rather than chasing a rumor blindly. That careful preparation earns Deng's respect, because the decision is very different from Gipong's secret realm gamble. Unyang began after several cultivation families discovered and fought over a valuable spiritual vein. After years of conflict, the major forces divided shares and began recruiting people to build a functioning market. That creates genuine opportunity, because nearly every supporting profession is still undersupplied. Deng raises a cup and wishes Zhang Wu and Nan's success on the new frontier. Wan Yu and Li Huayao do the same, even though the approaching separation makes the atmosphere bittersweet. Zhang Wu promises that Deng will always have a place to stay if he ever visits Unyong. The friends agree that distance should not erase more than a decade of shared apprenticeship. Across the bonfire, the women turn the conversation toward Li Huayao's own marriage prospects. Li Huayao blushes when they mention the man recently introduced by her family. That reaction tells everyone more than her words do. She eventually admits the man is connected to a branch family, planning to move toward Unyong Market. If the match develops, Li Huayao may leave Xiongji as well. The realization makes Wan Yu understand that the workshop generation she grew up with is beginning to scatter. Deng accepts it more calmly, because people who cultivate, marry, and seek opportunity cannot remain in one courtyard forever. He reminds Wan Yu that Unyong is only a journey away rather than another world. Her cautious nature still prefers staying near home, and Deng does not pressure her to think otherwise. For now, Qianji holds everything important to them: family, the workshop, cultivation resources, and their growing children. Deng continues refining fasting pills as and other low-grade medicines between family responsibilities. Repeated failure gradually turns each furnace step into instinct instead of conscious calculation. His fire control lets him correct temperature changes faster, while his pharmacology helps predict conflicts before ingredients are combined. Li Huayao progresses too, although she still needs far more supervision to maintain the same consistency. Every successful pill makes Deng understand why alchemy rewards patient people disproportionately. A cultivator can memorize a formula in a day, but reliable refinement requires hundreds of nearly identical attempts. Farming, cultivation, medicine, fire control, marriage, and parenting have all grown through accumulated ordinary days rather than one miracle. Even the Book of 100 Lifetimes does not replace that work. It only gives his soul more chances to carry lessons forward. Jin Sunsung's dangerous foundation establishment attempt becomes another reminder that time is valuable only while the cultivator remains alive. Deng therefore keeps building strength without abandoning the caution that preserved him from the secret realm. As his friends prepare to leave Cheongji, he turns back toward the furnace, knowing his own next years will be measured in pills and cultivation levels. The first usable fasting pill was only a beginning. The real goal is becoming an alchemist capable of supporting his family without depending entirely on Huang Wulong. That independence matters more now that Huijin has started cultivating, and future children may need resources of their own. Deng has finally reached the point where professional mastery and family responsibility are becoming the same problem. He resolves to solve both the way he solves cultivation, patiently, repeatedly, and without gambling everything on a single opportunity. Deng returns from the farewell gathering and throws himself back into alchemy. Because the craft still contains far more than he has learned. Huang Wulong begins teaching the family's secret fire control methods and pill condensation techniques, without holding anything important back. By this stage, Deng has also reached the 6th level of qi refining. His stronger mana makes the furnace easier to control and gives him enough endurance for more demanding refinements. The Huang family's deeper technique can divide one flame into enormous numbers of individually controlled threads. At true mastery, each thread can heat a different part of the same ingredient with its own precise intensity. That makes it possible to refine medicines with conflicting properties inside one furnace without destroying either component. After years of practice, Deng can already control roughly 1,000 threads at once. He uses them to wrap separate ingredients, melt them independently, and guide each medicinal liquid toward the correct stage. Once purified, those liquids are drawn together and spun until centrifugal force drives remaining impurities outward. The forming pill must then be solidified and sealed before its spiritual power can escape. This final sealing stage is where family inheritances differ most dramatically and where high-quality pills are often decided. Huang Wulong created his own spirit sealing art after years of studying other masters and testing what he understood. When performed correctly, the technique traps most of a pill's spiritual power instead of letting it disperse during retrieval. Deng applies the method to the Huang family's rejuvenation pill and finally produces an emerald pill with excellent color and fragrance. The medicine lacks top spiritual patterns, but its purity still qualifies as a minor high-quality result. That is an enormous achievement, because even ordinary alchemists can spend a lifetime without refining a difficult pill to that standard. Huang Wulong examines the result repeatedly before making a decision that changes Deng's position in the workshop. From the next day forward, Deng will be responsible for refining the family's rejuvenation pills, sold to cultivation. The old master warns that every batch now carries the workshop's reputation, rather than functioning as private practice. He also gives Deng 80% of the profit from the pills he personally refines. Remaining share covers furnace use, ingredients, and the workshop structure supporting the business. Deng calculates that the arrangement can earn several hundred spirit stones a year. For the first time, he can support his wife and children with his own craft instead of relying mostly on Huang Wulong. That financial independence lifts a burden Deng has carried since marrying into the household. At home, Wan Yu is pregnant again, while their daughter Huijin trains beneath the grape trellis. Huijin has grown into a talented young cultivator, with a firm Dao heart and an obvious love for sword techniques. Her medium-grade root lets her advance far faster than Deng ever did under similar conditions. She has already reached the later part of the third level of qi refining and is approaching the fourth. Early and middle stage bottlenecks barely trouble her compared with the wall's low-grade cultivator's face. Deng continues sparring with his daughter, even though her sword control talent is beginning to surpass his own. His higher realm and fire control experience still let him teach timing, pressure, positioning, and disciplined use of mana. Wanyu jokes that Huijin forgets her mother whenever her father is available. Huijin immediately switches sides, massages Wanyu's shoulders, and talks until her mother starts laughing again. The scene leaves Deng quietly grateful for a second life that became a genuine family rather than merely another reincarnation vessel. Soon afterward, another farewell banquet brings Li Huayao back together with the old workshop circle. She has completed her apprenticeship, married Zhang Shichang, and is preparing to move toward Unyong Market. Her husband is already a 6th level qi refining cultivator, giving the pair a solid position for starting elsewhere. Li Huayao notices Wanyu's pregnancy and immediately proposes linking their unborn children through marriage or sworn siblinghood. Wanyu laughs at the ambition and warns that raising another child may cure Li Huayao of romantic ideas about parenthood. The old friends joke about Huijin's childhood disasters, including the time she destroyed carefully organized medicine shelves while learning to walk. Behind the laughter sits the reality that another member of their generation is leaving Xianxia. Several powerful families are shifting people and resources toward Unyong because the mature Xianxia market offers less room for expansion. A great sect now takes a significant portion of Xianxia's profits, reducing the influence of the families that originally built it. Unyong gives those same forces a chance to establish new territory before another suzerain dominates the structure. Li Huayao and Zhang Shichang therefore leave with a larger family migration, rather than traveling as an isolated couple. Wanyu is saddened by how steadily old friends are scattering. Deng reminds her that the distance can still be crossed in days, and separation does not automatically mean loss. Neither of them actually wants to move, because their cautious temperaments prefer the security already established around the Huang workshop. Elsewhere, Qin Degang's household carries a much heavier silence. Jin Sunsung never returns from his foundation establishment attempt. With no body to recover and no reliable witness, the old man can only assume the barrier claimed another talented cultivator. Qin Degang pours the affection once meant for his son into young Qinwan. The boy possesses only a low-grade wood spiritual root, far below the talent Qin Sung. After losing his son, Qin Degang no longer cares whether the grandson becomes a famous cultivator. He would rather see Qinwan live cautiously, continue the family line, and avoid dying for an impossible realm. Wanyu later gives birth to Deng's younger son. Deng chooses a peaceful name and hopes the boy will enjoy a smoother life than people obsessed with the cultivation ladder. Huijin immediately becomes a protective older sister and carries the child everywhere she is allowed. 3 more years pass, and regular customers begin noticing that Huang Wulang appears at the front of the workshop less often. Deng now handles most daily operations and has become the visible new shopkeeper. Customers are told openly that the son-in-law is already a medium-grade alchemist, capable of refining all 3 signature products. Some buyers initially worry that quality will decline. When the old master steps back, repeated batches prove the opposite, and concern gradually becomes praise for Huang Wulang's judgment in choosing an heir. With Deng handling routine business, Huang Wulang finally devotes himself fully to an old obsession. 2 decades earlier, he purchased a fragmentary second-tier pill formula called the Sangwan pill at auction. The formula came from a secret realm and was incomplete enough that most buyers considered it a scholar's puzzle rather than a usable inheritance. Huang Wulang spent more than 10 years reconstructing missing steps, ingredients, and medicinal relationships. Once Deng's pharmacology became advanced enough, the two began working on the problem together. Dozens of failed versions eventually produced a formula. Neither alchemist could improve further through theory alone. The only remaining question is whether the reconstructed medicine can actually be refined. Huang Wulang takes the furnace personally because the difficulty exceeds anything Deng has mastered. Thousands of fire threads spread through the cauldron like a silver web and wrap the ingredients separately. The old master performs stabilizing, condensation, and spirit-locking seals while sweat gathers across his brow. At last, the furnace opens and releases an indigo pill into a waiting jade bottle. The fact that complete pill formed at all proves the reconstructed formula is not fundamentally impossible. Deng congratulates Huang Wulang, but the old master refuses to celebrate before verifying what the medicine actually does. Huang Wulong therefore begins a formal appraisal, instead of trusting appearance. Alchemy uses a 5-stage evaluation process. Prepare tools, observe form, smell scent, discern taste, and verify actual effects. Every vessel is cleaned with spirit spring water, so outside impurities cannot distort the result. Huang Wulong washes, clears his senses, burns incense, and approaches the pill with the seriousness of another refinement. Using an observation technique, he magnifies the medicine within his spiritual vision and studies every surface detail. The pill's body is full, its color is even, and its internal spiritual paths remain continuous. Those signs confirm that the reconstructed medicine genuinely belongs among high-grade pills. Huang Wulong immediately teaches Deng the observation method, so the younger alchemist the same evidence himself. They continue through scent and taste, comparing each result with known pharmacological properties. By the third stage, Huang Wulong believes the pill remains an essence-increasing medicine descended from the original Songwan formula. That category makes the result extremely valuable because pills that directly increase mana rank among the most desirable cultivation resources. Breakthrough pills hold the highest value, followed by medicines that add magic power and then ordinary daily cultivation aids. An essence-increasing medicine can save years for cultivators, racing toward the limit of their lifespan. That potential explains why Huang Wulong refuses to make assumptions before the final biological test. He prepares a carefully measured dose in spirit spring water, rather than giving an untested pill directly to a person. A small red-tailed spiritual mouse becomes the first living subject. Huang Wulong administers only 2 drops and immediately monitors the creature's dantian and meridians. Spiritual power surges so strongly that the mouse swells round with its fur standing on end. The old master quickly guides the energy through its channels to prevent the tiny body from being overwhelmed. After the surge settles, the mouse returns to normal with brighter eyes and noticeably healthier fur. The result is promising, but one successful animal test is not enough for either cautious alchemist. Deng and Huang Wulong begin a longer verification period before allowing the medicine anywhere near the workshop shelves. The reconstructed formula may become the family's greatest product yet, but Deng has learned never to confuse an exciting first result with proof. The red-tailed mouse survives the trial, its fur brighter, and its spiritual energy noticeably stronger afterward. Deng guides the surging medicine through its tiny meridians, preventing the unexpected burst from damaging the creature. The result looks promising, but neither Deng nor Huang Wulong is willing to trust a single successful animal test. They continue observing the mouse and repeating controlled trials for 2 full months before discussing human use. Only after the formula shows consistent safety does Huang Wulong decide to test the pill on himself. He swallows 1 pill, meditates for 2 hours, and carefully measures every change inside his dantian. The verdict finally gives the family something worth celebrating. The medicine directly increases late-stage qi refining power. For cultivators racing toward great perfection, 1 properly refined pill can save roughly 2 years of ordinary cultivation. That time matters because foundation establishment becomes increasingly dangerous once age begins eroding the body's condition. Huang Wulong immediately recognizes the commercial value and suggests making the reconstructed formula a new signature product. Names it the Essence Boosting Pill, a simple title that tells buyers exactly why they should care. News spreads through Xianxia market faster than the workshop can prepare its first serious batch. Late-stage cultivators hear that 1 pill can buy back years, and suddenly the Huang workshop has a waiting list. The initial price settles around 300 spirit stones, expensive, but still cheaper than many high-grade magical artifacts. Its effect diminishes with repeated use, preventing wealthy cultivators from swallowing an endless stack and skipping cultivations entirely. The first few doses provide the greatest value, which makes them especially attractive to cultivators approaching important bottlenecks. Huang Wulong becomes the best advertisement by taking several pills himself under Deng's supervision. His accumulated power finally pushes him into the great perfection of qi refining. The breakthrough draws even more customers because buyers can now see the medicine working on the workshop's own master. Huang Wulong is already past the age when attempting foundation establishment safely makes sense. He accepts that limitation without bitterness and focuses instead on strengthening the inheritance he can leave behind. For younger late-stage cultivators, however, the essence-boosting pill represents precious years recovered before their best foundation establishment window closes. Orders pile up so quickly that Deng begins worrying the family has attracted more attention than its defenses can comfortably handle. Huang Wulang answers that wealth always creates risk, but refusing a good opportunity does not make the cultivation world safer. They refine carefully, limit supply, and avoid pretending the workshop can satisfy every desperate buyer immediately. After the first frenzy, regional demand gradually settles as most nearby late-stage cultivators obtain what they can afford. The workshop's largest repeat customer becomes the Chiang Mai Chamber of Commerce, an organization connected to the Xianxia sect. The chamber negotiates a lower wholesale price in exchange for purchasing a fixed annual quantity. Deng dislikes the thinner margin at first, but Huang Wulang cares far more about the relationship than the immediate profit. Spirit stones can buy common goods, while the chamber's network can locate resources that never reach ordinary market stalls. That difference becomes crucial whenever the family eventually searches for foundation establishment materials or rare ores. With the business stabilized, Deng finally turns toward a problem. No amount of profit can solve automatically. His younger son possesses no spiritual root and therefore cannot inherit a cultivator's life. Hui Jin has strong talent, but her heart is to swordsmanship rather than furnaces and medicinal theory. Deng refuses to force either child into becoming the successor he personally wants. Instead, the memory of Jin Sunsung's son returns, while he considers who might genuinely love the alchemy path. He visits the Qin residence and immediately notices how much age has hollowed Qin Degang's once strong frame. Qin Degang's wife has already passed away, leaving the old manager with only his grandson in the household. In the courtyard, young Qin Wan practices spells with a seriousness unusual for someone his age. His features remind Deng painfully of Qin Song, while his steady temperament feels even more familiar. Degang brightens when Deng arrives and calls Qin Wan over to greet the old family friend properly. The boy bows without childish hesitation, answering every question with clear eyes and measured words. Deng likes him almost immediately, not because of nostalgia alone, but because the boy already displays patience. Inside the hall, Deng explains that he wants to take Qin Wan as an alchemy disciple. Qin Degang is too stunned to answer at first, because the offer carries enormous value for a declining household. Deng explains that his own children will not inherit the craft in the way he once imagined. Qin Wan, however, possesses a suitable spiritual root, a steady mind, and the discipline required for years of technical study. Deng promises to teach him without deliberately hiding the important parts of the Huang family alchemy inheritance. Tears gather in Qin Degang's eyes before the old man can compose himself. He understands that Deng is offering more than lessons. He is giving Qin Wan a livelihood and a cultivation path. Deng tells him their families have been connected too long to speak, as though this were charity between strangers. Qin Degang finally calls the boy forward and orders him to perform the formal kowtow to acknowledge his master. Qin Wan kneels and strikes his forehead against the floor 3 times with enough force to leave a red mark. Deng immediately pulls him up, applies medicine, and tells him sincerity does not require injuring himself. Qin Degang still insists the ceremony matters because accepting a master creates obligations deeper than ordinary employment. After Qin Wan leaves the room, Qin Degang reveals the truth he has avoided discussing for years. Qin Song never vanished on some distant mission. He failed his attempt at foundation establishment. The news shocks Deng because Qin Song had reached great perfection while still frighteningly young. If someone that gifted could fall at the threshold, then the danger of foundation establishment becomes impossible to romanticize. Qin Degang says grief crushed him after losing his son, eventually causing a severe chi deviation. His meridians have deteriorated ever since, and only responsibility toward Qin Wan kept him fighting for more time. He had planned to beg Deng for help once his body could no longer hold on. Deng, arriving first, removes the old man's greatest remaining fear without forcing him to ask. Several days later, the apprenticeship banquet is held properly inside the Huang family compound. Watching Qin Wan offer tea sends Deng's memory back to the day he entered this same lineage as a young apprentice. He accepts the cup and formally introduces Huang Wanyu as the boy's mistress. Huang Wulang becomes Qin Wan's grandmaster, visibly pleased that the family craft now has another generation. Before the ceremony can become too solemn, Deng Huijin rushes home with a sword across her back. Years of training have carried her into the middle stage of qi, refining and sharpened her confidence dramatically. She notices Qinwan immediately and inspects her new junior brother with absolutely no concern for his embarrassment. Huijin tells him to eat more, train harder, and stop looking so nervous around his own family. Qinwan turns red under the attention, which only makes Huijin laugh harder. Huang Wanyu scolds her daughter for bullying someone younger and reminds her that she was once even smaller. Huijin ignores the history lesson and announces that Qinwan can use her name if anyone ever troubles him. The shy boy finally looks up and thanks his senior sister, while Deng quietly watches the relationship begin naturally. Deng starts Qinwan with pharmacology, medicinal processing, and the same tedious foundations he once endured himself. The boy absorbs lessons quickly and, more importantly, returns the next day having actually reviewed everything. His diligence reminds Deng of his own apprenticeship far more than raw talent ever could. Teaching Qinwan also reorganizes Deng's knowledge because explaining old principles forces him to understand them more cleanly. Within months, the disciple can identify medicinal materials and perform basic processing with reassuring consistency. Deng briefly considers whether Huijin and Qinwan might someday form the same kind of partnership he found with Wanyu. He abandons the thought almost immediately because neither child's future should become another elder's private arrangement. Huijin lives for swordsmanship and cultivation, while Qinwan increasingly disappears into the pharmacies and fire control room. Their paths may converge naturally or separate completely, and Deng decides both outcomes are acceptable. Another month passes before Qin Degang's condition suddenly collapses beyond recovery. Qinwan kneels beside the bed with swollen eyes, while the old man struggles through his final instructions. Deng promises again that Qinwan will be treated like his own son and taught the family craft properly. Qin Degang tells his grandson to remain cautious, avoid pointless competition, and preserve the family line when the time comes. With that burden finally settled, the old man closes his eyes and dies peacefully. Deng says little, because there is nothing intelligent to add to a death everyone knew was approaching. He helps Qinwan through the first shock and takes responsibility for organizing the funeral. Friends and former market acquaintances arrive over the next 2 days to pay their respects. Qinwan remains beside Deng throughout the ceremony, grieving quietly while performing every required duty. Huijin returns to support him without jokes, proving her earlier teasing never meant she considered his pain unimportant. After the funeral, Qinwan moves fully into the Huang household and resumes his training under Deng. The loss makes him even more disciplined, though Deng watches carefully to ensure grief does not become self-destructive obsession. At the same time, Deng begins considering his own stalled cultivation again. His 6th-level qi refining foundation is strong, but the gate into late-stage cultivation refuses to open through patience alone. A cloud-dispelling pill offers the conventional solution, even though one dose costs hundreds of spirit stones. Deng decides the workshop can finally afford that gamble without endangering the family's daily survival. Deng enters seclusion only after resting several days and stabilizing every trace of spiritual power inside his body. He takes out the pale cloud-dispelling pill and reminds himself how much money one failed attempt can waste. The pill exists specifically to loosen the barrier between middle and late-stage qi refining. Deng swallows it, circulates his technique, and drives the rising medicinal force directly toward the stubborn bottleneck. For hours, the barrier bends without truly opening, while pressure accumulates through his meridians. Eventually, the attack collapses backward, leaving his dantian disordered and several channels painfully strained. 2 days later, Deng leaves the seclusion room pale enough that Qinwan immediately runs to support him. The disciple checks his pulse and realizes his master has not merely exhausted himself. Huang Wanyu joins them and helps Deng back to bed before he can pretend walking normally proves anything. Deng admits the breakthrough failed and complains that his carefully prepared foundation still could not force the gate open. He had deliberately avoided mana-boosting pills because their accumulated toxins can make later bottlenecks even worse. Average cultivators often delay those medicines until late-stage qi refining, when every remaining year before foundation establishment becomes precious. Wanyu reminds him that late-stage bottlenecks are difficult precisely because cultivators who cross them become far more valuable. Even Huang Wulang needed repeated attempts before breaking through at the same stage. Deng accepts the argument, though it does nothing to make the wasted spirit stones feel pleasant. The meridian injury will require months of careful recovery before he can cultivate aggressively again. Another cloud-dispelling pill should not be used immediately, giving his body even more time to settle. Deng calculates that his remaining lifespan still permits another serious attempt, and perhaps one genuine shot at foundation establishment. Instead of brooding, he turns the forced recovery period toward the part of cultivation that does not require pushing his realm. The alchemy furnace becomes his main battlefield for the next 2 years. Repeated refinement sharpens his hand seals, heat control, ingredient timing, and the judgment required to rescue imperfect batches. He studies failures instead of hiding them, recording exactly where medicinal power escaped or impurities survived. Qinhuan grows alongside him, spending long days in pharmacology and then practicing fire control until his hands tremble. The disciple's seriousness gives Deng another reason not to waste the slower years on self-pity. By the time peach blossoms have bloomed and fallen twice, Deng's alchemy has changed more than his cultivation realm. During one difficult refinement, thousands of controlled flame strands weave across the furnace mouth like a living net. The ingredients melt evenly, merge under exact pressure, and condense into a stable indigo pill. Deng catches the finished medicine and immediately begins judging its appearance, fragrance, structure, and medicinal potency. The result meets the standard of a genuine high-grade first-tier pill. Qinhuan congratulates him because the achievement means Deng can finally be recognized publicly as a high-grade alchemist. Deng laughs at the title but cannot deny what it represents after decades of accumulated work across this lifetime. His failed breakthrough unexpectedly gave him uninterrupted time to solve technical problems he might otherwise have rushed past. He sends the pill to Huang Wulong, whose inspection confirms that the quality is not an accidental success. The older alchemist studies the pill veins and calmly tells Deng that the family now has another high-grade craftsman. That statement matters more to Deng than market praise, because Huang Wulong understands exactly how difficult the step was. Qinhuan watches their discussion silently, forcing every unfamiliar term into memory for later study. Huang Wulong then asks how far the boy has progressed with the mysterious yang fire control art. Qinhuan admits he can reach the final stage temporarily, though the condensed golden glow still collapses too easily. They move to the fire control room so the Grandmaster can see the technique directly. Qinhuan draws spiritual flame to his fingertips, splits it, layers it, and turns the separate currents into a controlled wheel. The final compression produces a golden cluster that trembles violently before dispersing. Huang Wulong does not criticize the failure, because reaching that point within only a few years is already exceptional. Deng remembers needing far longer to touch the same stage, and feels uncomplicated pride in his disciple. Huang Wulong says a lineage is fortunate when the pupil can eventually surpass the master. Qinhuan becomes embarrassed by praise from both elders and immediately lowers his head. For Huang Wulong, however, the moment proves that the family craft can continue. After his own hands stop working, he gradually transfers more routine pill production to Deng and spends his remaining energy studying formulas and improvements. The old alchemist wants to leave knowledge behind. Rather than spend his final years repeating work younger people can perform. A month later, Deng prepares for the late-stage bottleneck, again with none of the impatience that weakened his first attempt. His body is recovered, his spiritual power has settled, and years of furnace work have strengthened his control. The second cloud-dispelling pill sends another wave of medicinal force into the barrier. This time the accumulated pressure finds a path instead of rebounding through his meridian. Breaks into the 7th level of qi refining and spends another day stabilizing the new circulation. When he leaves seclusion, the change in his aura is obvious even before anyone asks. Huijin appears first, congratulating her father with enough excitement to alert half the courtyard. Deng asks about her own cultivation and learns that the middle stage has finally slowed her remarkable early progress. She has still reached the 5th level in only a few years, a pace comfortably faster than Deng managed at the same age. Huijin insists her father may soon catch her numerically because he can now use resources suited for late-stage cultivators. Her joke becomes a loud announcement when she runs ahead to tell Wan Yu that the breakthrough succeeded. Wan Yu pretends irritation at the noise while secretly checking Deng's pulse before allowing herself to relax. Only after confirming his spiritual power is stable does she order the kitchen to prepare additional dishes. That evening, husband and wife finally discuss the next years without a bottleneck hanging over every sentence. Wan Yu has also kept cultivating despite her famous laziness and has reached the 6th level of qi refining. Deng teases her until she pinches his arm, then admits her steady progress matters more than speed. Conversation. Wan Yu produces an invitation from the Qiongmai Chamber of Commerce. the chamber will hold its once a grand auction in several months. Rumors claim a genuine Foundation establishment pill will appear as the final item. Deng assumes the rumor is probably deliberate publicity, though the chamber rarely risks its reputation with complete fabrications. Even if the pill is real, their family cannot compete financially with major clans and Foundation establishment experts. Wanyu agrees, noting that a single Foundation establishment resource can cost many years of workshop profit. Their alchemy business now earns comfortably, but daily cultivation, research equipment, and household expenses consume a large share. Deng still wants to attend because rare auctions reveal what resources actually exist beyond ordinary shelves. Wan Yu then brings up a different item she remembers from an earlier auction, the pulse protection pill. The medicine barely helps someone succeed at Foundation establishment, but that is not why she wants it. Its purpose is preserving meridians and saving a cultivator's life when a Foundation establishment attempt collapses. Wan Yu has no illusion about their low-grade roots or the terrible odds waiting at the end of qi refining. She tells Deng that if they ever reach great perfection, surviving failure matters more than pretending. Death proves courage. Deng points out that the protection loses effectiveness under repeated surges and may reduce the remaining chance of success. Wan Yu answers that a slightly worse chance means little when their original odds are already painfully low. Her real request is simple. Neither of them should gamble the other's life, merely to look determined. Deng takes her hand and agrees that both will carry a pulse protection pill before attempting Foundation establishment. Wan Yu relaxes because that promise, not the auction invitation, was what she truly wanted from the conversation. Over the next 2 months, Deng begins using the essence-boosting pills his own workshop helped create. Several doses rapidly deepen his 7th-level cultivation and recover years that ordinary meditation would have required. The speed is tempting enough that Deng finally understands why late-stage cultivators tolerate medicinal awakens. After enough doses, however, the diminishing returns become obvious, and the impurities inside his dantian begin causing discomfort. He stops before greed converts short-term progress into a worse future bottleneck. Deng plans to spend years circulating naturally, expelling impurities, and stabilizing the power already gained. By the time the auction arrives, his cultivation sits deep in the 7th level and no longer feels newly broken through. The invitation admits Deng, Wan Yu, and Huang Wulang together. They arrive at the Chiangmai Treasure Pavilion beneath an ebony dome filled with countless luminous pearls. The hall is crowded almost entirely with late-stage cultivators, great perfection experts, and carefully disguised guide buyers. Several screened private rooms carry spiritual pressure so deep that Deng immediately recognizes Foundation establishment cultivators. Their presence confirms that the rumored final item is probably real. Even before bidding begins, Deng understands this auction belongs to a financial world far above the workshop's ordinary business. Masked cultivators occupy ordinary seats beside respected market figures, reminding Deng that valuable auctions encourage secrecy as much as status. Nobody appears interested in casual conversation because every bidder is measuring competitors and protecting the size of their own purse. Huang Wulong recognizes several familiar Soras, but wisely avoids exposing identities that their owners have chosen to conceal. Wan Yu keeps the invitation token safely stored and quietly warns Deng not to get carried away by the first attractive item. Deng promises nothing except that he will remember how many years of workshop profit every raised paddle represents. The auction's host is an elderly Foundation establishment cultivator whose presence quiets the enormous hall without any need for threats. He introduces himself as one of the Chiangmai Chamber's senior managers and immediately begins moving through the catalog. Artifacts, talismans, spiritual materials, rare herbs, and formulas pass across the stage at a pace designed to keep bidders excited. Deng watches more than he bids because most attractive items would consume months or years of workshop profit. A top-tier set of sword techniques finally interests him enough to raise his paddle. Jin's future matters more than adding another personal artifact to a collection he does not need. After several rounds of bidding, Deng secures the sword inheritance for roughly 1,300 spirit stones. The price hurts, but a technique suited for his daughter's path can continue paying value for decades. Later, a youth preservation pill appears, and Wan Yu immediately pretends she has absolutely no interest in it. Deng recognizes the performance, bids anyway, and wins the pill for a little under 900 spirit stones. Wan Yu complains about waste while protecting the jade box with considerably more care than her words suggest. Huang Wulong laughs at both of them and saves his own attention for a pill formula that appears later. Unfortunately, the bidding climbs beyond any sensible price before the old alchemist can secure it. He withdraws instead of letting pride turn research curiosity into financial stupidity. As the auction approaches its final segment, the atmosphere changes throughout the entire pavilion. Ordinary high-grade artifacts stop mattering once the host announces the first foundation establishment spiritual resource. Even masked cultivators sit straighter, because every item now represents a measurable chance at crossing the greatest early bottleneck. The first major resource is Azure Spirit Water, capable of cleansing blood and spiritual energy before an attempted breakthrough. Its improvement to success probability is modest, but even a small increase becomes priceless when failure may mean death. Bidding races upward until the Azure Spirit Water sells for roughly 23,000 spirit stones. Deng mentally compares that price with years of workshop earnings and understands how wealth separates cultivation classes. The most shocking support item is the 3 Ajin Divine Pill, a second-tier medicine that develops spiritual sense. Its effect can raise foundation establishment chances dramatically compared with ordinary auxiliary resources. The hammer finally falls at roughly 31,000 spirit stones. Wan Yu stares at the result and mutters that their entire household could live comfortably for years on a fraction of that amount. Huang Long answers that this is exactly why talented rogue cultivators often spend entire lives trapped beneath foundation establishment. Deng listens carefully because the 100-lifetime path changes his risk calculation without making resources irrelevant. If one lifetime fails, another may come, but every life still benefits from building stronger family foundations and better inheritance. The final item is announced only after attendants reinforce the stage and the private rooms become completely silent. A genuine foundation establishment pill appears inside a sealed container protected by multiple formations. The host states that the pill was refined by a respected master and possesses exceptionally high medicinal efficacy. Unlike minor auxiliary resources, this medicine can transform a cultivator's probability of success directly. The opening bid begins at 40,000 spirit stones. Nobody on the ordinary floor even pretends to participate. Voices emerge only from the screened private rooms, each increase representing wealth beyond most chi refining cultivators' entire lives. The price climbs through the 40s, while the audience reacts to every new bid. Deng watches major factions compete and realizes that the auction is also a public display of regional power. Eventually, the Zhu clan refuses to retreat and pushes the price to 67,000 spirit stones. The hammer falls, giving them the foundation establishment pill, while several rival rooms fall completely silent. Whispers spread that an aging clan expert may be preparing one final attempt before his body declines too far. Jin cannot know whether that rumor is true, but the price proves desperation at the bottleneck is not exaggerated. The grand auction ends with servants escorting winners towards secure payment rooms and guards watching every exit. Wan Yu's main disappointment has nothing to do with the foundation establishment pill they never expected to afford. She complains that the entire event failed to offer even one pulse protection pill. Deng reminds her that protective medicine is far less rare than the grand prize and will eventually appear somewhere else. He repeats his promise that neither of them will challenge foundation establishment recklessly without protection. Wan Yu accepts the answer, though she still looks offended that the auction catalog ignored her preferred item. Back at the workshop, ordinary life resumes almost immediately, despite the enormous fortunes traded that night. Jin receives the sword techniques Deng purchased and disappears into study with predictable enthusiasm. Wan Yu quietly uses the youth preservation pill after insisting several more times that it was unnecessary. Huang Wulong returns to formula research, still determined to leave every useful discovery he can manage. Qinwan continues advancing through alchemy with the same discipline that first convinced Deng to accept him. Deng himself returns to the less glamorous work of stabilizing cultivation and clearing medicinal impurities. He refuses to chase the 8th level, while his foundation still carries residue from rapid pill-assisted growth. Months become years inside the familiar rhythm of furnaces, cultivation rooms, family meals, and market business. The workshop's connection with the Qiongmai chamber remains valuable even when individual deals produce thinner profit. Through that relationship, Deng hears about resources and regional movements long before ordinary spirit farmers learn anything. He also sees more clearly that family strength is measured across generations, rather than through one cultivator's current realm. His first life created descendants, so the Book of 100 Lifetimes would always have another bloodline body available. This second life is teaching him why those descendants need knowledge, businesses, techniques, and relationships as much as raw numbers. A spiritual route opened the cultivation path, but it did not remove the need to build something durable around that opportunity. Deng's marriage, children, disciple, and workshop have become part of the achievement, rather than distractions from it. Even mortality feels different now, because another reincarnation no longer means this lifetime was disposable. Every formula refined, and every person trained can improve the starting conditions of lives that come later. That realization makes Deng increasingly patient with progress that would once have felt unbearably slow. He can spend years purifying one realm, because the book has already taught him to think in lifetimes. Wang Yu continues cultivating beside him, moving at her own pace, while refusing to let his seriousness replace ordinary family life. Hui Jin advances along the sword path and becomes increasingly independent from her parents' daily supervision. Their younger son, unable to cultivate, is prepared for a mortal future built around practical skills and family wealth. Deng refuses to treat that fate as worthless, merely because it lacks spiritual power. His first life proved that mortals can still build bloodlines, political influence, and foundations cultivators later inherit. Qinhuan's alchemy becomes steadily more reliable, as repetition transforms knowledge into instinct. The young disciple increasingly handles responsibilities that once required Deng's direct supervision. Huang Wulong watches those changes with the satisfaction of someone seeing his lineage survive beyond one generation. Time also continues reducing the old master's strength, making succession less theoretical with every passing season. Deng accepts more of the workshop's decisions without pretending that inheritance means replacing Huang Wulong emotionally. The family's business becomes steadier, its techniques deeper, and its network wider than when Deng first arrived as a poor apprentice. The book changed his spiritual route before reincarnation, but Deng still had to spend years learning every craft afterward. That distinction becomes the core of his 100 lifetime advantage. Each life can repair one weakness, earn one's talent, or create one inheritance that the next life may build upon. The result is not instant perfection, but a path where failure no longer needs to be permanent. Deng remains aware that 99 possible future lives do not guarantee every reincarnation will be comfortable or safe. His bloodline must survive, suitable descendants must exist, and each lifetime still contains choices that can waste opportunity. That is why he keeps treating the current life seriously, instead of merely waiting for a better reincarnation. Several more years pass quietly around the Huang family's alchemy workshop. Peach blossoms bloom, fall, and return, while cultivation continues behind closed doors. Deng eventually enters another period of seclusion, with spiritual energy gathering densely around the chamber. A crimson pill floats before him, its color deeper and more concentrated than the medicines shown earlier. The source identifies the medicine as an origins pill, but does not fully explain its effect before the scene ends. The Book of 100 Lifetimes remains his greatest long-term advantage, but the current moment belongs entirely to this second life. He began this incarnation as a poor spirit farmer with a low-grade root and almost no resources. Now he has become a high-grade alchemist, a late-stage cultivator, a husband, a father, and the master of his own disciple. His family possesses a profitable inheritance, stronger connections, and a path that can continue after his death. Yet, foundation establishment still waits somewhere beyond the current realm, proving the second lifetime is nowhere near complete. The crimson origin pill hangs motionless before Deng Yun as he prepares for whatever comes next. The source cuts off before Deng swallows it or reveals what the pill will accomplish.